Welcome to this first episode of Motor City UK. I'm Rob Capaldi. Let me start by asking you a question. What is the city of Coventry famous for? The most common answers to this question are Lady Godiva, the Blitz, and the car industry. Most people unfortunately believe these three symbols of the city to be firmly consigned to the history books. The first two are, for sure, key parts of the city's medieval and 20th century history. The third, however, remains an important and vibrant part of the fabric of the city today. Since the late 1800s, Coventry has sat at the epicentre of the UK car industry, being home to the country's earliest production plants, seeing a tremendous boom in manufacture through the 20th century, and in recent years being reinvented at the hub for the development of innovative vehicle technologies. In this new podcast, we will explore the past, present, and future of the car industry in Coventry. We'll study the origins and development of car production in the area. We'll hear from the people at the heart of car culture in the city today, and we'll look forward to understand the work taking place to ensure this hotbed of advanced R&D is ready for the changes bound to influence the motor car in the coming years. The format for this podcast is going to be varied. Documentary-style deep dives into the industrial history of the city and the brands that have called it home will give you insight into the important people and places that have shaped the car industry over the last 150 years. Some shows will be interviews in which we will meet interesting people with stories to tell from inside the industry, looking both into the past and the future to understand the real-world context of history and to discuss the exciting developments that are ongoing to secure the city's place at the heart of advanced R&D. We'll meet people embedded in the buoyant car enthusiast community to fully understand how car culture truly pulses through the veins of this diverse, multicultural city. We'll go behind the scenes with a varied range of companies and organisations committed to Coventry, both those preserving automotive history and those driving change for the future. In this first episode, there's really only one place we can start our journey, at the very beginning. Why was Coventry ideally placed to become the centre of the UK car industry? Who were the key players in the journey, and how did the boom in production shape a medieval city into a manufacturing powerhouse? To fully understand the answers to these questions, we need to look back more than 20 years before car production arrived in Sandy Lane. In 1861, the time of Dickens and Darwin, a group of innovators began reshaping Coventry's industrial base. Josiah Turner and James Starley had met whilst both working at the Newton, Wilson and Company sewing machine manufacturers in London in the late 1850s. They partnered with American Silas Salisbury to set up the European Sewing Machine Company in Coventry to import and sell American-made sewing machines. They soon made the move and began manufacture of their own machines under the Coventry Sewing Machine Company brand. Coventry was a logical location for this new enterprise. As England was in the grips of the Second Industrial Revolution, the prominent trades of the First Industrial Revolution in the city were finding themselves out of work. Silk weavers and watchmakers were ready to be deployed in their droves to this new growing industry. The assembly of the intricate mechanical mechanisms of sewing machines required the same dexterity and attention to detail as watchmaking, and therefore, through the 1860s, the Coventry Sewing Machine Company became a major employer in the city. You may be asking, why are we talking about sewing machines in this story of vehicle manufacturing in Coventry? To answer this question, in 1868, we take our first major step in our journey towards vehicle production. And to see this step, we need to take a quick excursion across the Channel. Josiah Turner's nephew, Rowley B. Turner, was working in Paris as the importer of his uncle's sewing machines. While there, he was staggered to see the number of people moving around the French capital on a new type of vehicle, the velocipede, a primitive form of bicycle that had pedals attached directly to the front wheel, an evolution of the dandy horse, an early balance bike that predated it. He bought an example of the velocipede to his uncle, and quickly the Coventry Sewing Machine Company pivoted to become the Coventry Machinists Company, and kicked off mass production of velocipedes for Rowley to export to Europe. Led by James Starley, the Coventry machinists began improving on the imported velocipede design, increasing efficiency, comfort and performance while quickly scaling production. The Franco-Prussian War of the 1870s slowed velocipede production in mainland Europe, so manufacture in Coventry boomed, establishing its position as a leading location for bicycle manufacture. Soon, James Starley broke away from his business partners, and along with watchmaker William B. Smith and William Hillman, later to find fame as the father of Hillman cars, to establish Smith, Starley and Company, and began work on the manufacture of a new concept, the aerial bicycle, now more commonly known as the penny farthing. Through the 1870s, this design became widespread, with ever-increasing front wheel sizes to improve efficiency at the cost of stability. To learn more about this story, I travelled to the Coventry Transport Museum to meet Damien Kimberley, Archives and Local Studies Officer at Culture Coventry and renowned local historian.
I began my association with the Transport Museum around the millennium. I just finished my master's degree at Ironbridge and had to do a bit of a work placement. So I chose here. They got me sort of working on to research the motorcycle industry at that time. So I began that. I was here for about 6 weeks and then was eventually sort of invited back a few years later. So I began in 2005 as a motorcycle project officer, which was funded by the British Motorcycle Charitable Trust. It was a 2-year post. We were designing a new bespoke motorcycle gallery, and a stipulation of the post was to create a publication as well. So, and that came out in 2007.
To continue the story, Damien picks up as we walk through the packed galleries of the Transport Museum, highlighting the important exhibits as cycle manufacture begins to move away from the penny farthing towards the bicycles that more closely resemble those we recognise today. And we start to see our first glimpses of the emerging motor manufacturing industry that's about to explode in the city.
You can see this one here, which was created by Harry Lawson in 1879, was kind of scoffed at the time, but he was trying to get the bike back to a safer level. And he created this machine. And you can see for the first time, it's got a chain drive to the rear wheel, and it's more of a safer size and more manageable, but it was scoffed at.
So what we're seeing is the front wheel has reduced in size slightly compared to the penny farthing.
Yeah.
The wheelbase has increased. The rear wheel size has increased.
Yeah.
And we have a chain drive rather than direct drive onto the front wheel.
That's right. Yes. If we go over to this one here, which is the Rover safety bicycle, and it was created by John Kemp Starley, who was the nephew of James Starley. He kind of perfected this. I mean, Lawson always said that he was the inventor of the safety bicycle, and I think he was in as much as he coined the phrase safety. John Kemp Starley, his mid-1880s design was just marketed better, but also it coincided with John Boyd Dunlop's pneumatic tyre. So all these things coming together, you ultimately get this diamond-framed machine, 2 similar size wheel. It's driven to the back wheel by chain. There's no free wheel at this point, but we get in there. We get into a machine where anyone literally can learn to ride.
Yeah, we can see the link to bicycles today with friction brakes and chain drive and like you say, similar wheel sizes. But we have to note Rover.
Yeah,
suddenly is born. Was Rover created as a bicycle manufacturer, or did they have history before bicycles?
No, it was so the first machines built by Starley's one of the directors that just came up with this name Rover, and I think it has sort of connotations towards a name of a canine anyway at the time, and roaming and roving and that kind of thing. So yeah, but obviously Rover became one of the biggest names in British motor industry. Were active in Coventry up until the Second World War, by which time they'd moved a short distance up sort of Solihull way.
Harry Lawson, the inventor of the safety bicycle, is a key figure in our journey towards motor manufacturing in the city. He formed the British Motor Syndicate in 1895 and set about acquiring patents directly related to the motor car manufacture and planning for their ongoing licensing in the years that followed. 2 years later, Frederick Sims, the man widely credited as the person to coin the term motor car, and founder of both the Royal Automobile Club and the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, established the Daimler Motor Syndicate to hold the UK patents for the German brand. Sims had a long-standing relationship with Gottlieb Daimler, one of the big three pioneers of the motor car, along with Wilhelm Maybach and Carl Benz. During 1895, Sims sold the rights to the Daimler patents to Lawson, and on 14th of January 1896, Lawson founded the Daimler Motor Company Limited, with the specific objective of manufacturing motor vehicles on a mass production scale in the UK. To do this, there was a strong need for new premises and a dedicated factory in which to base his planned motor car manufacturing empire. Having considered locations in Birmingham and Cheltenham, he quickly realised Coventry was ideally placed to establish a base. The city was Europe's largest manufacturer of bicycles at this point, so the skills and supply chain for complex fabrication were well established. Damien picks up the story of the founding of the motor mills on Sandy Lane.
There was this old cotton mill that had been refurbished after a fire. It was just stood there and it seemed like the perfect fit. And they turned it into the motor mills.
Okay.
And in that factory, there was several different companies. There were the Daimler Company, the Great Horseless Carriage Company. Humber had a floor. There was an American called Pennington who had a floor. There was all sorts of activity going on there. So that was a stomping ground for any budding engineers that wanted to get at the thick of the very beginnings of the motor industry.
So when the motor mills were opened, you mentioned a few different brands. Which was the first to have a vehicle that we would recognise as a motor car come off the end of a production line?
Definitively, I couldn't say, but it would either be the Great Horseless Carriage Company or it would be Daimler.
The first Daimler left Sandy Lane in January 1897. By the middle of the year, 3 vehicles a week were coming through the doors, making Daimler the UK's first serial production vehicle manufacturer. The cars had a front-mounted twin-cylinder engine, 4-speed gearbox, and a steering wheel. There was clear and distinct link to the cars of today in terms of layout, powertrain type, and controls. In October 1897, a 4-horsepower Daimler completed the 939-mile journey from John O'Groats to Land's End in 93.5 hours, driven by Henry Sturmey. The journey was a national sensation, and soon after, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, became a customer. Lawson had succeeded in kick-starting an automotive revolution in the city, with the motor mills at the centre of it. Coventry's industrial ecosystem, its engineers, its skilled labour, and its culture of mechanical innovation was capable of building not just bicycles, but complex engines, chassis, gearboxes, and assembling them into complete motor cars. In the years that followed, consolidation took place. By 1900, Daimler had exclusive use of the motor mills, and new manufacturers were cropping up all over the city. As we move through the exhibits in the Transport Museum, we jump forward to the early 1900s.
10 years have passed or so. So it's quite a different,
significant change in a short period of time. We're definitely seeing what people today would recognise as a motor car.
Yeah.
The layout is very in line with what we still see, with a front-mounted radiator and engine, a windscreen, a steering wheel, doors, pneumatic tyres.
Yeah.
The other thing that we can see in this room is a number of signs with many brands that were obviously here and present in Coventry: Rover, Riley, Maudsley, Humber, names that no longer exist. If I look around, I think the only name on the signs we can see that still exists is Daimler.
And I suppose Rover in terms of Jaguar Land Rover.
Indeed.
But yeah, so it's a nice space in the museum, and it's supported well, as you say, with these once great names and some good some visuals on the walls as well. We can see the Rover factory's huge Meteor works that once existed on Queen Victoria Road, Garfield Road. That part of Coventry is now being completely redeveloped again. And then another thing about some of the early machines, I'm looking at a Singer motor bicycle here, is And as you can see, the first motorbicycles,
they had a pedal. They had pedals as well as an engine.
They did, but it was ultimately using a bicycle frame and where do I put the engine? And in this case, it was quite dynamic at the time. They put the engine within an alloy wheel in the back. But you can also see that it's not only driven by an engine, it's also got a chain drive to the back with pedals as well.
If you were to see that today, that would be viewed as quite advanced. The sort of the motor mounted in the wheel with a really quite beautiful forged aluminium wheel surrounding the motor. It's quite an impressive piece of engineering.
Absolutely. So you just need to work out where you're going to put the engine, and a lot of them adapted the bottom frame to make it into a more of a loop frame, where they would fit the engine. Some had the engine at the front, but then it's like, where do I put the engine? Where do I put the fuel tank? Carburetors and this, that, and the other. It does. And how people had to adapt.
Okay, so where does the journey take us next?
So we're sort of propelling through to the beginnings of the First World War. Coventry being such a manufacturing centre, it was a bit of a dilemma because there was so much manufacturing going on that was still needed, but also they were openly recruiting as many men as they could. So there were lots of tribunals going on at the time about the importance of keeping someone home to manufacture things for the war effort, or is it time for them to go off? What we've got on the right hand side here is a Triumph, and it's a very battered looking Triumph.
At that time, was Triumph as a company a motor car manufacturer and a motorcycle manufacturer, or had they split at that point, or had they not started with cars yet?
They were cautious with the motorbike. They didn't make the first ones till 1902. The same happened with the motor car. They didn't make their first motor cars until after the First World War. So in 1920, Bettman himself had kind of tapped into it on a separate basis away from Triumph in 1904 with a company that he started called the Climax Motor Company. And I think he got his fingers burnt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just cost way too much money. It wasn't a success. So it wasn't until after the First World War they made Triumph motor cars, and they become hugely famous. So we've kind of hit the 1920s now, which is kind of my favourite period. Just so much happening. A lot of men have come back from war and can drive. There's loads of machines that are being made more economically now. You can get a car now for £100, as in, which was still expensive back then, but you're not paying 1,000, you're paying 100. There's lots of motorcycles, as you can see, motorcycles and sidecars. So people are they're getting their independence and are able to, it's still expensive. Even a bicycle was relatively expensive, but it was becoming more and more.
Is this where we really start to see the boom through the 1920s?
Yeah, I believe so.
Between 1900 and 1923, the number of manufacturers active in the city boomed, with a peak of 43 manufacturers in operation in 1922. During this time period, several key manufacturers established their operations. Companies like Alvis, Hillman, Lee Francis, Riley, Standard, Singer, and Triumph would spend decades manufacturing cars in Coventry and become synonymous with the city. The layout of the city developed rapidly in line with the growth in manufacturing volume, with the medieval streets becoming full of industrial facilities. The sheer volume of vehicles being produced necessitated the move into even larger factories further away from the city centre. Production methods evolved as Coventry-based manufacturers started to deploy assembly line production pioneered by Ransom Olds and Henry Ford in the USA. This development, along with the sheer volume of manufacturers, is evident as we move through the Transport Museum. So in this room, which we have that sort of interwar period, what is the most significant exhibit that we can see in this room? Or is it the exhibit itself, just the variety and the manufacturers?
So. And manufacturing techniques as well. In America, they started to do this more track assembly method, and this was kind of started to be copied by the Standard Motor Company. You had a lot of companies that were fleeting, tried it for a year or two, So there are one or two. This Albatross, for example, is it's a perfect example of that.
What would cause them to fail? They obviously come along. It's a vehicle that from the outside has the hallmarks of those that surround it. It's a standardized design. It's not anything too unique in its layout. It must be using the same kind of supply chain, the same manufacturing techniques.
So. I think it was just the volume. There was not just in Coventry, but all over the country at this point. There's scores and scores of similar machines.
Supply outstripping demand at that point.
And I don't know the sort of some of the factors, but but it's such a rare machine that to have that. It's probably must be the only one of its kind.
Okay, so we're up to 1925 at this point. Lee Francis J-Type. Lee Francis being a very at one point well-known brand that has long since disappeared.
Lee Francis again, another early bicycle manufacturers. The bicycles they made were just a different cut above the rest of some others. If you rode a Lee Francis, it
was high quality.
Yeah,
you knew it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they carried that kind of name, that reputation into motorcycles and their cars as well. And they kind of they went through the difficulties in the 1930s. I think they had to be relaunched. And then there was a bit of a comeback in the 1990s with a former owner as well. They made a few tractors in the 50s.
Yeah,
fascinating company.
By the late 1920s, we see the arrival of possibly the most significant manufacturer in Coventry's history.
We're looking at the origins of Jaguar cars here, because the coach builders that created this body were the Swallow Coach Building Company. They started initially in Blackpool just after the First World War, and moved to Coventry purposely in 1927 to be at the thick of manufacturing.
So did Swallow Coach Building become Swallow Sidecar Company that became SS, became SS Jaguar?
Yeah, that's right.
That's the lineage.
SS Jaguar, and then after the war, 1945, started just Jaguar. Yeah.
The car we were looking at here was an Austin Swallow, an open-top two-seater sports car. The first foray into vehicle manufacture taken by William Lyons and William Walmsley in the late 1920s. They were, up to this point, manufacturing motorcycle sidecars, initially working with the Coventry-based manufacturer Montgomery. Their business was booming, and they made the move into coach building as a way to make the best use of their growing workforce. Their development progressed rapidly, and by the end of 1928, they were producing 50 vehicle bodies per week, and in the following year expanded the range of chassis upon which they based their vehicles, bringing Standard, Swift and Wolseley into the mix, before kicking off a project to develop their own chassis, designed by Lyons and built by the Standard Motor Company. This gave birth to the SS1, first revealed to the public in 1931 to critical and public acclaim. The Swallow Coach Building Company was a hit, and by 1934 was operating as SS Cars Limited, as chief designer William Haynes took the firm away from coach building to focus on production of vehicles in their own right. In 1935, the Jaguar name was introduced as a standalone model. The SS Jaguar gave the company immense success up to the outbreak of war in 1939. We took a look at the Transport Museum's stunning SS Jaguar as we moved on through the exhibition. So we're into the 1930s now. There seems to be a sudden change at this point.
Everyone's drawn towards this absolutely stunning Jaguar, early SS machine. It just oozes absolute class, really, doesn't it?
It really does. So what can we see here that we can identify this as a Jaguar? Were they using the name Jaguar at this point, or were they SS?
They started to use the Jaguar as the name of a particular model, but they were SS Jaguar.
It's very low and sleek compared to the cars that sit around it. Would this have been viewed as is this a sports car of its time, or is this a luxury car of its time?
I would put this down as equivalent today as a BMW sort of M3.
High performance enthusiast's car, as opposed to maybe if we look directly opposite it, we can see Queen Mary's Daimler, which is the other end of the spectrum, huge in comparison.
It's enormous, isn't it? Daimler were always one of the favourites of the royalty, and I think they've probably still got a number of them tucked away in garages that bring them out for particular occasions.
What's your view on Jaguar? Are they the most historically significant Coventry-based manufacturer, given that they are still in existence and are still developing and trying to be at the forefront of technology?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you was to say what's the most famous brand ever to come out of Coventry, manufacturing-wise, it certainly would be Jaguar.
Do you have a personal favourite?
I am always drawn to the E-types because I just think it's just a stunning vehicle. It was Enzo Ferrari that said that it's the most beautiful car that he'd ever seen.
This is where we'll draw this first episode to a close. The birth of Coventry's most famous brand seems a good place to pause the story. We'll hear more from Damien in future episodes as we delve deep into some of the other key manufacturers that have called Coventry home and investigate the key events that took place after the Second World War and through the latter half of the 20th century as the number of car manufacturers consolidated and evolved. You can read more about Coventry's automotive, motorcycle and bicycle history in Damien's books. Links to these are in the show notes below. Thanks to Coventry Transport Museum for welcoming me and making the exhibits available outside of normal operating hours, so we could record without the usual hustle and bustle of public opening. You should take a look at the Transport Museum on social media. They can be found on Instagram as @CovTM. The museum's a great day out with a wide range of interactive exhibits and many hidden gems from the city's exciting industrial heritage. While you're on Instagram, be sure to follow the podcast. We're simply @MotorCityPod. All one word, no spaces. You can see behind the scenes as we record more episodes and keep up to date with new episodes as they're released. And finally, if you like what you've heard today, please do follow us on your podcast app of choice. Leave a quick review and be sure to click a 5-star rating to help us reach more people with the stories from the UK's original motor city. Tune in next time as we continue our mission to understand the city of Coventry's unique relationship with the motor car.